He introduced her as his fiancée. She didn't correct him, not because she agreed, but because his boss had just walked into the room. And the man who froze at the sight of her wasn't a stranger. He was the one she never forgot, the man she walked away from years ago. And this time, he was walking toward her. Welcome to Mr. Charles Stories, where love tests the balance between truth and ambition, and second chances never arrive quietly. Have you ever been introduced as something you never agreed to be? Have you ever stood in a room full of power and realized someone else decided your story for you? Drop a comment if you've ever had to smile through a moment you wanted to walk away from. If you're ready for a story about quiet strength, emotional reckoning, and a love that returned without warning, stay with us. Let's begin. Elira Noel had never worn a gown that cost more than 2 months' rent. Tonight, she was zipped into one. It was navy silk, shaped to her frame like second skin, with a modest neckline, but backless detail that made her feel exposed in a way she didn't like. The mirror reflected someone elegant, calm, but her heart pulsed behind her ribs like it didn't know how to sit still. Behind her, Talon Greaves adjusted his cufflinks like he was used to being watched. "You look perfect," he said. "That dress was made for you." She gave him a small smile. "I still don't understand why a design consultant needs to attend an investor gala. You're more than that tonight." He stepped closer, resting a velvet box on the counter. "You're my edge." When he opened it, her breath caught. A platinum bracelet, delicate and cold in the light, sat inside. A single charm hung from the middle, a sharp G initial, carved with luxury precision. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Talon reached for her wrist, a Greaves emblem. "My family's. Tonight we make sure certain board members know I've settled, that I'm grounded. You wearing this helps confirm that." She blinked. "So this is for the deal?" "Of course not." He smiled smoothly. "It's for us. But it doesn't hurt to look solid in the eyes of shareholders." He fastened it before she could answer. "Just wear it," he added. "Let them know you're mine." That word, mine, hit her stomach sideways. She looked down at the bracelet, then at her own reflection. For someone who prided herself on reading a room, she'd missed how fast Talon moved behind curtains. 3 months ago, she had met him at a luxury development pitch. He was clean-cut, smooth, magnetic in the way only rich men who'd never been told no could be. She wasn't instantly smitten. He was too calculated for her taste, but he had charm. He also gave her a shot when others wouldn't. He'd loved her portfolio, said it looked like it had a soul. That compliment bought him her time. His consistency bought him more. But tonight, that bracelet bought him her silence. They arrived with the kind of quiet spectacle Talon was known for. No flashbulbs, no cameras, just presence. The valet knew his name. The doormen stood a little straighter. The ballroom was all glass and height, chandeliers dripping crystal, white marble floors, polished like lake ice, and a crowd that smelled like old wealth and new influence. Elira walked in beside Talon. She didn't hold his arm. She didn't need to. Her elegance didn't beg attention, but it commanded it anyway. He leaned down as they stepped into the lobby buzz. "Smile a little. You're not walking into court." She gave him the side of her mouth. "Feels like it." He chuckled, but didn't disagree. Inside, the room was pulsing with conversation and potential. Clusters of CEOs, investors, and high-ranking executives buzzed near wine tables and velvet rope lounges. Talon's phone pinged once. He checked it. "They're here. Let's make it count." She followed him through the crowd. He greeted people with practiced warmth, introducing her as the woman who reimagined my Manhattan penthouse. To some, she was his design visionary. To others, his quiet secret weapon. But to one group, his 4 closest investors, he said something else entirely. "Elira Noel," he said with an arm around her waist, "the woman who finally tamed me." The men laughed. "Wait, you're saying this one's the one?" one asked, lifting a glass. Talon smiled. "Let's just say the next property I acquire, We'll probably have a nursery." The men erupted. Elira stood still, expression unreadable. He added, "You'll be seeing her at more events. She's not just passing through, she's family now." One of them raised an eyebrow at the bracelet on her wrist. "Is that what I think it is?" the man asked. Talon gave a proud nod. "Official enough." Elira froze. She felt something click into place. Not love, not joy, but branding. She stood near the long marble bar, glass of sparkling water in hand, watching the chandelier reflect in the mirror. The bracelet felt heavier now. It wasn't jewelry. It was a label. She caught her reflection again and whispered under her breath, "What am I doing here?" That was when the room shifted, the volume dimmed by some invisible current, the kind of silence that falls when someone important walks in. Not loud, not obvious, but all at once, people subtly turned. Glasses paused mid-air. Conversations adjusted. She followed their gaze. A tall man, black suit, no tie, walked in with purpose. No smile, no need to announce himself. Cassian Rowan. She'd only heard his name once. From Talon. The real founder, the ghost investor, Talon's silent boss. He was rarely seen. But when he entered a room, people adjusted their posture. Elira did too, but for a different reason. Her chest tightened. Her hands went cold. Because she knew that walk. She knew those eyes. And he had stopped walking the moment he saw her. Across the ballroom, Cassian stood frozen. Expression unreadable. His gaze locked on hers like time had reached out and grabbed him by the throat. And Elira couldn't breathe. Back when life smelled like roasted beans and old pages. Back when he sat every Thursday by the corner window, reading letters. To a young poet, and she brought him chamomile tea without asking. He never wore a suit back then. She never wore makeup. Their conversations were always short, always real. He listened more than he spoke. She noticed. He smiled differently when the room was quiet. He once told her, "Most people listen to respond. You listen to understand." She replied, "Most people pretend to be interesting. You don't." One night, she admitted she wanted to design spaces that felt like safety. Not just expensive homes, but dignity wrapped in design. He looked at her like she'd said something sacred. "The world needs women like you," he'd said softly. "Don't let people turn your clarity into confusion." They kissed only once. Outside, in the snow, when the bookstore closed early due to the storm. It wasn't passionate. It was steady and warm. But the next week, he never came. And the week after that, she Googled his name. Because someone had slipped up. She saw a headline, "Cassian Rowan, billionaire heir to Rowan Developments." She panicked, thought it was all an act, that he had lied. And she disappeared. Cassian Rowan was no act. He was walking toward her now, but not like a boss, like a man who had waited too long for a face he never forgot. And Talon was still shaking hands, unaware that the ground beneath him had just shifted. Talon didn't notice the shift at first. He was mid-laugh, charming a table of European investors, with some story about a villa in Tuscany. But the energy in the room had already changed. He looked up, following the glances, then saw Cassian. He smiled wide, lifted a hand in welcome. "Cassian, glad you made it." Cassian didn't respond. He walked straight past two directors, past a stunned-looking hostess, past a champagne server who instinctively stepped aside. He stopped only when he reached her. Elira's fingers tightened around her glass. She felt the sting of reality rush through her. Cassian looked older, sharper jaw, tired eyes. He wasn't the man from the bookstore anymore, but something in him hadn't changed. His voice was low, not soft, just steady. "It's you." It wasn't a question. Elira swallowed. "I didn't think you'd recognize me." His gaze dropped to her wrist. The bracelet, that sharp-edged G gleamed under the ballroom lights. He blinked once, then turned toward Talon, who had finally crossed the room, confusion giving way to recognition. The tension arrived before the words. "You introduced her as your fiancée," Cassian said flatly. Talon hesitated. "It's not official." "Yet, you don't mark people like that," Cassian said, his tone now louder, audible to nearby guests. "Especially not her." Elira's lungs felt tight. Eyes were on her now. Whispers circled the rim of the gala like bees. Talon tried to laugh it off. "She knew what tonight meant." "She didn't know you," Cassian replied. There was no escalation, no raised voice, just silence and pressure. The kind of silence that pressed against a person's skin and made them shrink. Cassian turned back to her. His eyes hadn't lost their calm, but they carried something else now, something more worn. "You were never part of a deal," he said quietly. "Not with me. Not with anyone." Elira said nothing. Not yet. She looked at Talon. Then at the bracelet. Her fingers reached for the clasp behind her wrist. It took her a moment. Her hands were trembling more than she wanted to admit. She unclasped it, set it gently on the nearest tray beside an untouched glass of champagne. Then she looked up. "I'm no one's transaction." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. And then she turned and walked out, not rushed, not broken, just done. The room parted for her like water. No one stopped her. No one dared. She stepped into the cool night air, heart pounding, heels clicking sharply on the concrete as the street came into view. But behind her, footsteps, slower, heavier. She turned. Cassian stood there, hands in his coat pockets, not speaking, not chasing, just standing still. She exhaled. "Why did you come tonight?" His answer came without pause. "I saw your name on the guest list. I never forgot it. You built an empire," she said softly. "I built a way to find you." The wind picked up. A piece of her hair blew across her face. She didn't move it. He didn't move either. They stayed like that for a beat too long. "You could have reached out," she said. "You left without a word," he replied. "I thought you made peace with forgetting." Her jaw tensed. "I didn't forget. I protected myself." A yellow cab drove by behind them, slowing briefly as if to ask, but moved on. "You don't have to protect yourself now," Cassian said quietly. She laughed, one dry, tired breath. "You don't know that." "No, but I've waited 7 years to find out." They didn't touch. They didn't step closer, but the distance between them had already collapsed. He stepped aside, letting her choose whether to walk away or not. She looked toward the city skyline, the glow of glass towers in the distance. The gala noise still hummed behind them, muffled through marble walls. "Where would we even start?" she asked. Cassian's reply came slowly. "We start with a walk." She hesitated, then nodded. And they walked. The streets were quiet enough that their steps felt loud. A few pedestrians passed, some glancing at them, most not. They walked without speaking for 5-10 blocks, until they reached the East River. The view was clean, cold, still. They stood at the railing. Cassian leaned on it. Elira kept her hands in her coat. He said, "When you left, I thought I imagined it all. That maybe I'd mistaken your kindness for connection." "You didn't," she replied. "I replayed our conversations," he said. "Wondered if I said something wrong." "You didn't." He glanced at her. "Then why?" She closed her eyes. "I overheard someone say your full name." He waited. "I looked you up. I thought you'd lied, that I'd fallen into some rich man fantasy, that you were pretending to be someone normal." "I wasn't pretending," he said. "I'd been cut off. I worked at the firm bookstore, handled rentals for. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't being watched. I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like a cliché." She let the silence settle again, then said, "So you built everything?" He nodded. "Started small, got quiet. Grew when I stopped needing to be seen." She turned to him. "And Talon?" "My investor, one of many. But the only one who's been trying to be me instead of himself." That made her smile, A little. He's good at performing. Cassian didn't smile back. He used you. Her voice dropped. I let him. He shook his head. No. You gave him a version of trust. He turned it into leverage. Illyra looked down at the river. I told myself it was networking. It was branding, he said. That made her laugh, softer this time. You always had a way of saying things that sound like headlines, she said. He finally smiled. They stood quietly, watching the water move. Cassian said, I didn't want to say anything in there. Not until you looked at me. I wasn't sure it was real, she said. It is. She nodded slowly. I missed this. He didn't ask what. She added, the quiet. Cassian turned toward her. You can have more of it. No pressure. No performance. I don't want to go back, she said. But I don't know how to go forward with you either. Then don't rush. They were still standing in the same place, but it didn't feel like the same night anymore. Illyra looked at him for a long moment. So, what happens now? He said, we walk more, we talk. We don't name anything until it wants to be named. That was the kind of answer she remembered. Measured. Clear. Without pretending to fix everything, she took a step closer, not to touch, just to shorten the space. I don't want to be someone's symbol again, she said. Not a solution, not a trophy. You're not even yours. He looked her dead in the eye. You were never mine to begin with. You were always just Illyra. She blinked. It sounded so simple, but it shook something loose in her chest. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But when they walked away from the river, side by side again, her pace matched his. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was keeping up or holding back. She just felt equal. Talon Greaves didn't like being ignored, especially not by the one man who never attended these events. Never. Showed up unannounced and never stole his spotlight, until tonight. He stood alone now, near the central sculpture, his grip tightening on a glass of untouched whiskey. The investors he'd been charming had dispersed quietly, their attention drawn to the drama that had unfolded just minutes earlier. A few tried not to stare. Most had already begun murmuring. She took it off. Did you see his face? That was Rowan. Cassian Rowan. The bracelet lay untouched on a tray by the bar. Still shining, still expensive, still branded. But it was worthless now. Talon could feel the shift, an invisible crack down his carefully controlled image. And what made it worse wasn't Illyra walking away. It was Cassian following her. Outside, 2 blocks from the river, Illyra and Cassian stopped near a corner deli, its lights humming above the empty sidewalk. Do you want something hot? He asked, gesturing to the cafe window. I know a quiet place nearby if... Coffee sounds good, she said softly. They went inside. The air smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. It reminded her of Brooklyn mornings, when she used to sketch out room concepts on the back of receipts during her commute. The barista didn't recognize either of them. It was a good sign. They sat by the window, 2 mugs between them. No phones, no performance, no one to impress. Cassian watched her for a moment before saying anything. I never went back to that bookstore, he said. Why not? It wasn't just a place. It was you. She looked down. I kept wondering if you hated me for disappearing. I couldn't hate you. I tried, though. For about a year, Illyra smiled faintly. I told myself it was a story, he added. Something that happened while I was finding myself, and then you became someone else entirely. I became what I had to be, he said. But the moment I saw you again, none of that mattered. She ran a finger along the coffee cup. You looked at me like I never left. You didn't, he said. Not really. Silence sat between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. Illyra finally asked, what happens now with Talon? Cassian's gaze sharpened. He'll answer for it. Quietly. You're not going to blow it up? No. That's noise. He built a deal off manipulation. It'll collapse without me touching it. You always were patient. I waited 7 years, he said. 1 more week. Won't kill me. Elira shook her head, the corner of her mouth twitching. You're dangerous when you're calm. I'm dangerous when I care. They sat in that stillness for a while, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. Elira asked, "Do you want anything from me, Cassian?" He looked straight at her. "Just honesty." She nodded. "Then I'll be honest. I'm scared. Of me. No. Of this. Of what it means to trust again. I won't ask you to." "You already did." He didn't argue. She leaned back. "You know, I almost didn't go tonight." "Why did you?" "I wanted the design studio. I thought Talon's offer might push it through. I convinced myself it was worth it. Until it wasn't. Until you walked in," she said. He tilted his head. "So I ruined the plan. You saved me from it," she said. "Even if I didn't know I needed saving." Meanwhile, back at the ballroom, Talon wasn't thinking clearly anymore. He was walking briskly toward the private lounge, pulling out his phone, calling someone on the legal team. "I need the NDAs resent." "No leaks," he muttered. He knew what was coming. The bracelet was now a symbol of arrogance, not stability. He'd introduced Elira as his anchor. And the moment she rejected him, in public, he looked like a man who'd overreached. The merger partners were already pulling back. Cassian had said nothing more before walking out. But his silence was louder than anything. Talon punched the elevator button. Hard. If he had known what Elira meant to his boss, he would have never used her. At the coffee shop, Elira finally stood. "I should go," she said. Cassian didn't protest. He stood with her. As they stepped outside, she paused. "Don't follow me this time," she said softly. "I need space to think. Not because I'm leaving, but because I want to come back by choice." He nodded once. "I'll be where I always am," he said. She walked into the night, her heels clicking, head high. For the first time in a long time, she felt grounded, not claimed, not managed, just Elira. And that was enough. Cassian didn't go home that night. He didn't return to his penthouse, didn't check his phone, didn't even take the town car waiting outside the gala. Instead, he walked, alone. No driver, no assistant, no protection detail. He walked the length of 2 neighborhoods before stopping in front of a building he hadn't visited in years, his old 1-bedroom apartment, the one he'd lived in when he first met her. The lights were off. Someone else lived there now, but he stared up at the 3rd-floor window for a long time. Back when he had nothing, it was easier to believe that love could be real. Back when they talked about things like books and purpose instead of stocks and architecture. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something he hadn't looked at in ages. A folded napkin. From a cafe, 7 years old. Faded ink read, "The world needs women like you. Don't let people turn your clarity into confusion." He had written it while she was in the restroom, left it folded under her cup. She never mentioned it. Maybe she never saw it. But he kept it, because if there was one thing he never doubted, it was that Elira Noel didn't need to be made into something. She already was. Across the city, Elira stood in front of her apartment door, keys in hand, heart racing. It was a 2nd-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, tucked between a corner market and a flower shop that opened at 6 a.m. She'd chosen it because it was quiet, unassuming. Like her, she closed the door behind her and sat on the edge of the bed without removing her shoes. The gown shimmered in the dim light. She took out her earrings, placed them gently in a ceramic bowl, and exhaled long and deep. The night had gone sideways. The bracelet was gone. So was the illusion. But something else had returned. She still didn't know what it meant. Cassian didn't chase her, didn't pressure her. That alone made her want to consider the possibility again. She pulled her laptop from the nightstand and opened a file she hadn't touched in months. Studio design proposal. Elira Noel Interiors. The document stared back at her, unfinished. She began typing. Not for Talon, not for funding, just for herself. The next morning, Cassian walked into his private office at Rowan Holdings and said nothing to anyone. His assistant, Lauren, glanced at him once and knew better than to ask questions. He sat down, pulled up the pending acquisitions folder, and removed one. Talon's deal. He didn't delete it. He simply moved it into a separate folder titled Withheld. Later that day, he made 3 quiet calls to board members. No press, no scandal, just clarity. By the afternoon, Talon Greaves received a single-line email. The Rowan Holdings partnership proposal has been withdrawn. Please direct further inquiries to legal. He slammed his laptop shut, chest burning. He knew what this meant. His leverage was gone, and everyone would know. Elira spent the next 4 days reworking her proposal. She stripped out the trendy phrases, removed the commercial tone. She made it honest, about light and space and breath, about what it meant to walk into a room and feel safe. Her mother had always said, "You build homes from your heart before your hands." She finally understood what that meant. On the 5th day, she submitted it, not to a firm, to a community board in Brooklyn. A small project, housing for single women and children, modest budget, real purpose. She didn't need approval from the elite. She needed alignment with her truth. Cassian saw the press release 1 week later, not because she sent it to him. She didn't, but because his eyes always scanned for her name. He read the article 3 times. No mention of him, no mention of the gala, no hint of Talon. Just Elira Noel, Brooklyn-based designer, announces interior contribution to Eastgate Community Housing. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a comeback. It was a return to who she was, before the performance. 3 days later, he stood outside her new design space. It wasn't much, just a refurbished storefront with wide windows and a hand-painted sign, Noel and Company. He didn't ring the bell. She saw him through the window and opened the door herself. "You came," she said. "You didn't send the article. I didn't think I needed to." "You didn't." He stepped inside. The walls were still half-painted, furniture unarranged. Light spilled across the floor. It was raw, unfinished, but it felt alive. "Looks like you're building something," he said. "I am. Need help?" She turned to him. "Only if you don't try to fix it." He nodded. "Deal." They spent the next hour arranging shelves. No titles, no glances, no expectations. Just rhythm, just movement. Before leaving, he pulled something from his coat, a folded napkin, then took it with both hands. Her breath caught. "You still have this?" "I waited for the right moment to give it to you." She opened it. Her own words, written by him, stared back at her. "The world needs women like you. Don't let people turn your clarity into confusion." She looked up, eyes soft. "I never saw this. I know." She folded it again, slower this time, with care, then placed it in the drawer of her new desk. "I think this is where it belongs." Cassian stepped back. "Then so do you." Comment: she chose clarity over control. If you believe real love never forces a title. If this story moved you, share it with someone who values peace more than power. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more emotionally rich stories that stay with you. 7 years earlier, Elira Noel had just finished her shift at the small bookstore cafe in Boreham Hill. The windows steamed with winter breath. Her apron smelled like espresso and dust. Her hands were dry from folding cardboard cup sleeves too many times. The store was almost empty, except for one man. 3rd Thursday in a row. Same table, same chair, same book. He wasn't loud or distracting. In fact, he barely spoke. He just read. A worn copy of Letters to a Young Poet rested in his hands like it was personal, not for show. His fingers traced the underlines like he wasn't just revisiting the words, but living in them. She'd never caught his name, but she always gave him the same drink, chamomile tea with honey and a twist of lemon. He never ordered it, but he never corrected her either. On this particular evening, it was snowing lightly, the kind of snow that made people cancel plans and stay home. Not him, not her. She walked over, and refilled his water glass. He looked up and gave the smallest nod, like it mattered that she noticed. "You're always here on Thursdays," she said finally. He folded the page corner and looked up fully. His voice was soft but steady. "So are you?" She smiled. "I work here. I read here. Why this book? It reminds me to stay human." She tilted her head. "You don't seem like someone who needs the reminder." He gave her a look then. Not flirtatious, not defensive. Just deep. "Most people forget they're allowed to feel," he said. She let the silence sit for a moment, then asked, "Do you remember every line?" He shook his head. "No. Just the ones I've lived." That answer stayed with her for weeks. Over the next 2 months, they developed a rhythm. He'd arrive before sunset, order nothing, accept whatever she brought, and leave a $5 bill folded like origami. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was always meaningful. One night, she confessed her dream. "I want to design spaces that give people breath, not just pretty, real, healing, even if they're small." He asked, "What does safety look like in a room?" She paused. "Windows that open, corners with warmth, places you can sit without needing to perform." He stared at her for a long time, then said, "The world needs women like you. Don't let people turn your clarity into confusion." That night, as she cleared his table, she found a napkin folded under her cup. That quote, written in clean, all-cap handwriting. She tucked it into her sketchbook and never told anyone. They kissed once. The last time she saw him, it was snowing harder. The bookstore was closing early. She offered to walk him to the subway. They stepped outside. He held the door for her. She turned to say something, "Thank you maybe," but didn't get the words out. He leaned forward, not fast, not greedy, just enough to let her know it was okay to meet him halfway. She did. His hands didn't wander. His body didn't press. It was warm, still, quiet. When it ended, he said, "Only this. I don't know what this is yet." She whispered back, "I don't want to name it. I just want it to be real." Then she walked away, and he let her. 1 week later, he didn't show up. 2 weeks. 3. Then one night, she was restocking books when a man at the register called him by name. "Cassian," he said, "the firm wants you at the meeting by 7. Her hand froze over the cash drawer. She hadn't known his name. Not until that moment. That night, she typed it into a search bar, Cassian Rowan, and the articles flooded in. Billionaire heir to Rowan Developments. Powerful silent backer in half of Manhattan's skyline. Shares in 4 continents. Holdings in biotech, architecture, and education. Her stomach dropped. She clicked one photo. He was at a gala, wearing the same coat he wore to the bookstore. Same face. Same man. But suddenly, it felt like the conversations weren't real anymore. Like she'd been part of a story, written in someone else's language. She thought she'd been chosen for her clarity. Now it felt like she'd been tested. She didn't return to the cafe for a week, didn't answer messages, didn't write. And when she finally did show up again, he wasn't there. Not that night. Not ever again. In the present, Elira stood inside her studio and touched the edge of a clean shelf she'd just assembled. That memory washed over her, like paint over old brick. She remembered what scared her most. It wasn't that he had money. It was that he'd seen her so clearly, and she didn't know what he'd seen in return. Did he see her as a project? A purity test? A warm break from a cold world? Or had it been real? 7 years later, his silence said something different. He hadn't chased her then, but he was walking beside her now. That had to mean something. Back then, she had tried to tell herself he didn't mean it. That his kindness was part of some layered charm. That his listening was calculated. But no one wrote on napkins anymore. No one quoted her back to herself. No one looked at her without trying to turn her into something useful. Except him. She didn't know where the napkin had gone. She'd packed it in a sketchbook that got lost in her 3rd apartment move. But the words never left. and neither did the ache. That bookstore was gone now. She passed by it a month ago and saw a frozen yogurt shop instead. No more floor creaks, no more yellow light. But sometimes, late at night, she still heard the quiet of that corner, still felt the chamomile steam on her fingers, still tasted snow after that one kiss. And now he was back, but not asking for anything, just standing still. Cassian didn't speak much that first week after the gala. He went back to the rhythm that had kept him focused for years: early mornings, silent commutes, closed-door meetings, everything precise and controlled. But his mind wasn't in the boardroom. It was at a corner cafe that no longer existed. On a night she kissed him without a label, in a world where she still looked at him like he was a person, not a position. Elira kept moving too. Her studio space was coming together. No sponsors, no fake partnerships, no strategic smiles. Just stripped walls, honest textures, and light that she didn't dim for anyone. She declined an offer from a luxury hotel chain that wanted her to stage rooms for their Manhattan flagship. They want modern soul, the rep had said, but she could read through the pitch. They wanted the name attached to the gala scandal, the woman who had walked out, the one who stirred tension between billionaires. She wasn't interested in being a headline. She was building something different now. Her name on the door wasn't a marketing play. It was a reclamation. 7 years earlier, right after she disappeared, Cassian didn't go looking for her. Not because he didn't care, but because he believed the silence was her answer. He told himself he'd misread everything, that maybe she wasn't who he thought, that maybe she wasn't ready. But every time he looked at someone else, every time he tried to date or even entertain company, he saw her, the way she listened, the way she never rushed to respond, the way her eyes softened when talking about what a safe space could do for someone. She was never loud, but her absence screamed. So he buried it, focused, built. Rowan Holdings went global that year, and every new milestone felt a little quieter than the last. Present day, Elira stepped into a small local radio studio. A journalist she respected had invited her for a short spotlight interview on ethical design. Nothing flashy, no gossip, just ideas. "You've been in the news lately," the host said with a careful smile. "I prefer to stay in rooms where there are no cameras," Elira replied. The host smiled wider. "A lot of our listeners found your exit at the gala empowering. I didn't do it for applause." "Why did you?" "Because I realized I was a symbol in someone else's story," she said. "And I'm not interested in playing a role I didn't choose." The host nodded slowly. "And who are you in your story?" Elira smiled gently. "Still figuring that out. But this time, I get to write it myself." Cassian heard the interview the next morning in the back of his car. He didn't expect to feel something in his chest tighten, but it did. She wasn't asking for anything. Not pity, not partnership, just space to be real. He looked down at the napkin again. The ink was starting to fade, but the meaning hadn't. That night, he didn't go to a meeting. He showed up at her studio instead. No suit, no driver, just him. Elira was in leggings and a t-shirt, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through paint samples. She looked up, not surprised to see him. "You're early," she said. "I wasn't sure I'd get a second chance to be." She stood up. "What's in your hand?" He handed her a small square of folded paper. She opened it. Her breath caught. It was the napkin, not a copy, not rewritten, the original. Her eyes traced the writing, her own words, captured by his hand, handed back to her like a mirror. "I wrote this," she whispered. "You said it. I just made sure you didn't forget." She blinked hard. "Where did you keep it?" "Wallet, then vault, then drawer. Depends on what year you're asking." She laughed once, a little broken, a little amazed. "This is the one thing I wish I hadn't lost," she said. "You didn't lose it," he replied. "I just hadn't finished carrying it yet." She folded it again, carefully this time. No creases, no rush. "May I keep it now?" "It was always yours." She walked over to her desk and opened the top drawer. Placed the napkin inside, on top of her client's sketches and floor plans, then turned to him. "I'm not ready to start something big again," she said. "You don't have to," he answered. "But I'm not running either." "I know." She stepped closer. No fireworks, no confession, just trust, earned slowly. He didn't try to kiss her. She didn't reach for his hand, but they stood there, still and open, breathing in the same quiet for the first time in years. And it felt like something solid, something unfinished but unbroken. 7 years earlier, Elira had been so certain she was doing the right thing when she walked away from Cassian. It was the night after she heard his name. Cassian Rowan. She sat alone in her tiny studio apartment, surrounded by mismatched chairs and borrowed throw pillows, her laptop screen glowing with article after article. His face, clean-shaven, suited, standing beside global executives, flashed across every headline. She felt foolish. He had walked into that bookstore cafe in a plain wool coat. No driver, no watch, no arrogance. He listened. He asked real questions. He offered no title, no story. But now, it all looked like a script, and she hated how badly she wanted it to still be true. She paced the floor for hours that night, remembering everything he'd said, replaying every look, every word. She even pulled out the napkin again. His handwriting, her quote. She didn't cry. She just felt cold. Not the kind of cold that makes your hands shake, the kind that sets into your spine, the kind that says, "This isn't safe." And without sending a message, without warning, she disappeared. Cassian had waited 2 more Thursdays after that, sitting at the cafe, same corner, same tea. He never asked the barista where she went, never emailed the store. He just waited. The 3rd week, he didn't show. Present day, Elira stood in front of a group of 12 women in a community center conference room. They were reviewing layout options for the Eastgate housing project. All of them were single mothers or survivors of displacement, and one of them was going to have a say in how their space was designed. "No sharp corners on the tables," one woman said. "Kids bump into everything. We want natural light in the hallways," another added. "Not those buzzing lights that make everything feel like a clinic." Elira wrote everything down. She wasn't designing for awards. She was designing for restoration. When the meeting ended, she stayed behind to gather notes. One of the younger women approached her quietly. "You really listened to us." "I always will," Elira said softly. The girl nodded. "Most people just say they care. But you sat with us like we were already worthy." Elira paused. That moment hit deep, because once, a man had done the same for her, back before she'd learned how dangerous being seen could feel. Later that evening, Elira sat at her desk back at the studio, sorting fabric samples, when a soft knock tapped at the glass door. She looked up. Cassian. She unlocked the door, but didn't open it fully. "I thought I said I needed space," she said. "You did," he replied. "And I gave you 5 days. That's not space. That's patience on a leash." He raised a brow. "Did you want more?" "No." She stepped aside and let him in. He glanced around. "Place looks good. It's coming together, piece by piece. Like you." She looked at him sharply, but there was no accusation in his tone. Just observation. She went back to her desk and sat. "You didn't come here to check on progress." "No." "Then why?" Cassian took the seat across from her, the same calm in his posture he always carried. "Because I never got to explain. I didn't ask for an explanation," she said. "I know, but you deserve one anyway." Elira stared at him for a moment, then leaned back and crossed her arms. "Then talk." 7 years earlier, Cassian wasn't just the heir to Rowan Holdings. He was also the one member of the family trying to escape its shadow. After a public family scandal involving his uncle and a collapsed charity fund, Cassian had quietly stepped away from the Rowan name. He liquidated his personal shares, refused the monthly family stipend, and started his own architectural trust using old contacts from grad school. He worked under an alias on several projects, lived in a modest apartment, and read Rilke because it made the silence feel like a choice. I wasn't pretending to be poor, he told Elira now. I was trying to be honest about who I was without all the noise. She listened. No interruptions, no judgment. I didn't lie, but I didn't volunteer either, he continued. And I never wanted you to think I was testing you. I was just breathing again. You could have told me. I could have, he admitted. But I was afraid it would make you disappear. It did. I know. They sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked, "Why didn't you come for me?" "I thought your silence was your answer," he said. "And I didn't want to force something you'd already walked away from." She looked away. I was scared. I thought I'd made a mistake falling for someone who had the power to rewrite the story later. "I never wanted to write your story," he said gently. "I just wanted to be in it." Elira stood and walked toward the window. The city outside looked quieter than it was. Lights blinked in distant windows. Somewhere, a siren wailed. A dog barked. Life moved on. "I was angry for a long time," she said. "At you, at myself, at how easily I let something go because I didn't understand it." "I was angry too," he replied, "but mostly at time, for being so slow and then suddenly too late." She turned back to him. "Do you want something from me now, Cassian?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, finally, "I want to know you again, without labels, without fear. Just again." She let those words sit. No pressure, no manipulation, no performance, just presence. And after a long pause, she gave a small nod. "Then stay. Just for a little while." Cassian stayed, not as a guest, not as a man seeking something. He sat in a corner of the studio while Elira continued sorting swatches and testing lighting angles on the wall. They didn't talk much. It wasn't necessary. Sometimes, the sound of trust was silence that didn't demand filling. After an hour, she looked up. "You hungry?" He nodded. "Starving." She went to the small kitchenette at the back of the studio. It wasn't much, just a countertop toaster oven, a kettle, and a drawer full of mismatched silverware. She pulled out a container of roasted vegetables and couscous. "I eat like a student," she said. He grinned. "I miss that kind of eating." She handed him a plate. No complaints. No judging. None here. They ate sitting on the floor, backs against opposite walls, knees almost touching. Somewhere in the background, jazz hummed from a small Bluetooth speaker, low enough to disappear between bites. Halfway through, she asked, "What happened after I left? I mean, really?" He set his plate down and thought for a moment. "I shut everything out, drove myself into work, cut out people who wanted a version of me I couldn't live up to. There was a time I didn't speak to anyone outside my team for months." She raised a brow. "That sounds lonely." "It was," he said simply, "but it was safer than hoping for something and getting hurt again. I know that feeling." "You buried yourself in your work too," he said, looking around the studio. "Difference is, no one was watching me," she replied. "No headlines, no expectations, just me trying not to disappear." He studied her for a long second. "You didn't disappear. You became more visible. You just weren't performing." She smiled. "That's probably the nicest thing anyone said to me all year." He finished his food and placed the empty plate gently on the work table. "Elira." She looked up. "If I hadn't walked into that ballroom, would you have stayed with him?" She blinked. The question wasn't bitter. It was honest. "No," she said. "Even if I hadn't shown up." She paused. "I think I would have left anyway. Maybe not that night, maybe not that loudly. But eventually, yes, something about being marked without your consent catches up to you." He nodded. "I was angry when I saw that bracelet. Not just at him, at myself, for not showing up sooner. You didn't owe me that. I owed myself the truth." They sat for a moment in that space between apology and forgiveness. "I should have asked more questions back then," she said. "Instead, I assumed the worst. You were protecting yourself. And in the process, I ran from something good." They both knew the truth. Their story had broken once. But maybe the second draft could begin differently. The next morning, Elira woke up and immediately opened her sketchpad. Her lines came faster now, clearer. The East Gate housing layouts were progressing. She'd added subtle curves to the corners of the common rooms, skylights in 2 of the center units, shelves built into the hallways at child height. She wasn't just designing space, she was designing peace. At 10:12 a.m., a knock sounded at her studio again. Cassian, 2 coffees in hand. No suit, no guards, no fanfare. "You came back," she said, accepting the drink. "You said, 'Stay a little while,'" he said. "I'm just respecting the timeline." She laughed. "You're good at showing up when it counts." He paused before responding. "I don't want to take space in your life that doesn't belong to me." "You're not taking it. I'm offering it," she said. They walked inside. This time, he helped her paint a section of the east wall. He didn't ask for approval or suggest a better shade. He rolled the brush quietly, evenly, and let her decide where to stop. By lunch, they were sharing sandwiches on the back step. Elira noticed how little Cassian spoke, unless it mattered. It wasn't that he was cold, he just never wasted words. And maybe that was why she listened so carefully when he finally said, "There's a part of me that still wonders why we didn't fight harder. We were too young," she said. "And now, I'm still scared. But I know what not to do, which is run." He nodded. "Then I won't chase." She looked at him. "But I'll still need time. I've got time." The way he said it made her feel safer than any title could. Later that night, Elira walked into her apartment and saw the old sketchbook sitting on her windowsill. She'd found it the week after the gala, tucked behind an old box of scarves. Inside, she saw the original napkin, folded flat, carefully preserved. She held it up and smiled. He hadn't known she still had it. He kept his version anyway. It made her feel like, maybe, they'd both been holding on in different ways, different timelines. Same story, unfinished, but still open. The gala had made its way into quiet headlines. Not tabloids, those were too loud, too desperate. But in business newsletters, finance blogs, and investor whispers, the story unfolded subtly. Not about Elira, not even about Cassian, but about the bracelet. Talon Greaves had introduced a woman as his fiancée, marked her publicly, and within minutes, she'd walked out. A few days later, Rowan Holdings withdrew its support from his proposed merger. The headlines didn't connect the dots, but the people who mattered knew. Talon's name began circulating in back-channel conversations, not as the next visionary, but as the man who got too confident too fast. He called, emailed, tried to secure last-minute meetings. His partners responded with polite deferrals. The media had moved on. The investors had not. By the end of the week, one of his largest assets was frozen in contract limbo, and he knew exactly who had done it. Cassian never raised his voice. He didn't send lawyers or threats. He simply stepped back. And when a man like Cassian steps back, everyone else steps away too. Meanwhile, Elira sat at her studio desk, watching the morning light cut across her notes. She had slept well for the first time in a while. No tension in her shoulders, no second-guessing her choices, no Talon. She didn't know exactly where this thing with Cassian was going, but it didn't feel performative. It didn't feel urgent. It didn't feel like she was being managed. That was new. There was a knock at the door. This time, it wasn't Cassian. It was her mother. An unexpected visit, but not an unwelcome one. "Thought I'd stop by and see if my daughter still eats real food or just breathes in paint fumes," her mom said with a half smile. Elira laughed, pulling her into a hug. "I'm better now," she said. Finally, they sat near the window with tea. Her mother noticed the photos pinned to the wall, early layouts of the housing project, sketches of safe rooms, common spaces with thoughtful flow. "This looks like you," she said. Elira smiled. "It feels like me." Her mother reached for her hand. "I don't know what happened that night at the gala. I only saw a clip online. But the way you walked out, head high, not angry, not broken. I've never been prouder." Elira blinked fast. "Thank you. You've always had quiet power," her mom added. You just forgot how to use it for yourself. That same day, Cassian stepped into a meeting with two of the largest non-profit developers in the city. He didn't walk in with his name. He didn't flash his wealth. He offered a question. What if we build something that doesn't just house people, but helps them breathe? They listened, because when Cassian Ron said little, it usually meant something big was coming. And this time, the plan wasn't about ROI. It was about dignity. He didn't mention Elira, but her fingerprints were all over the vision. Later that night, she found a letter tucked under the door of her studio. No envelope, no signature, just a folded sheet of thick stationery. Inside, I've stopped trying to impress the world. I'm trying now to stand still long enough to hear you think. If you let me. She smiled, folded the letter, tucked it into the same drawer as the napkin. This wasn't some fireworks kind of love. It was the kind that showed up. That listened. That didn't need to claim. Talon Greaves stared out of his office window as the city buzzed beneath him. Just days ago, he was certain he'd walk into the biggest merger of his career. The numbers were lined up. The board was prepped. All he needed was the illusion of stability. So he marked Elira, called her his fiancée, wrapped the optics around her image. He didn't expect it to unravel in minutes. Didn't expect Cassian to show up. Didn't expect him to walk straight to her. But the part that bothered him most, the part that made him grit his teeth even now, was the way Elira looked at him before she left. Not like she hated him. Not even like she pitied him. She looked at him like she had outgrown the game. And Talon couldn't stand that. He thought about reaching out, crafting some careful message, maybe even spinning a version of apology. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't matter, because he hadn't just lost her trust. He lost Cassian's. And when Cassian stopped backing a man, everyone else stopped too. Across the city, Cassian sat at Elira's work table again. No guards, no deadlines, just presence. She was sorting through a stack of mood board requests for the housing project. He handed her a pair of scissors and leaned his elbow on the edge of the table, watching her work. "You always do that," she said. "What? Watch me like you're studying a language." "I am." She raised an eyebrow. "And what have you learned?" "That your silences say more than most people's shouting." She laughed under her breath. He smiled. "You want to know something I never said before?" He asked. "Always, the day you left, I waited for you outside the bookstore. For 2 hours." Her hand paused mid-cut. "I didn't know," she said. "You wouldn't have. I never told anyone. I stood there like a fool thinking maybe you'd come back, that maybe I misunderstood something. I thought you were pretending to be simple. I was trying to feel real." She sighed. "I let fear win. We both did." They sat quietly again. Then Elira asked, "So, what are we doing now, Cassian?" "Really? No labels," he said. "Just honesty and presence." She nodded. "That's enough for me right now." By the end of the week, her design proposal for the Eastgate common areas was approved. The board didn't just praise her for the visual quality. They praised the emotional impact. "You don't just design rooms," one of the directors said. "You design restoration." She walked out of the meeting that day with something more valuable than applause. Conviction. She wasn't building a name off a man anymore. She was building a life on her own terms. Cassian, meanwhile, sat in front of an old investment report and quietly redirected 2 properties to a trust Elira didn't know existed. He labeled it Clarity Projects. No announcement, no PR. He knew she didn't want spotlight. He just wanted her work to have room to breathe. That night, she found another folded note under her sketchbook. This one read, "You don't owe the world an explanation for choosing peace. You only owe yourself the freedom to keep it." She folded it carefully and slipped it into the drawer with the napkin and the first letter. 3 words were scribbled in the corner. No titles yet. She smiled. She didn't need titles. What they were building couldn't be summarized on a bracelet or a guest list. It was steadier than that. They walked through the city like they had time to spare. Not always together. Not every night. But often enough that the air between them grew softer, less guarded. Cassian never asked to stay late. Elira never rushed him out. Some nights, they didn't speak at all. They painted, rearranged furniture, shared leftovers on the floor, read quietly across from each other in worn chairs with mismatched throws. There was no declaration of intent, but there was comfort, and in that comfort, something rare bloomed, peace that didn't need performance. One evening, Elira closed the studio early and walked with him down to the river, the same spot where they'd stood weeks ago, after the gala. This time, there were no heels, no dress, just jeans, sneakers, and a scarf wrapped twice around her neck. They stood by the railing, the water dark and still. Cassian leaned against it, glancing at her. "You look lighter. I feel like I've been breathing through a straw for years," she said. "And someone finally handed me a window." He didn't laugh. He just nodded. She turned to him. "Can I ask something? Anything? What do people think you are that you're not?" He considered that. "A fixer," he said finally. "People come to me when they want things made clean, on paper, in the press, in the market. They think I like being invisible, but they also think I control everything from behind the scenes. Do you? I used to, and now, I'm tired." She smiled faintly. Tired is honest. He looked out at the water. "What about you? What do people think you are that you're not?" "Delicate," she said. "Polite, easily moved. They think I'm soft because I don't raise my voice." "You're not soft." "I'm tired too," she said. They stood together, a little closer now. He reached out and brushed his fingers across hers. Not gripping, not demanding, just being there. She didn't pull away. "I'm not ready for all the noise," she said. "I'm not offering noise." He took one step closer. Their shoulders touched. She turned, her breath catching. He kissed her, not with hunger, not with urgency, but with clarity, like a line being drawn in permanent ink. When it broke, she leaned into his chest without a word. Because some kisses didn't lead to conclusions, they led to beginnings. Back at her studio, she didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. But before he left, he placed a key on the desk, to an apartment she hadn't seen, with a note attached, "For when you need quiet, not escape, just quiet." She picked up the key slowly. "Cassian," she said. He turned. "You're not fixing me, right?" He shook his head. "No, I'm finally learning how not to break myself." Then he walked out, and she let him go, because she knew he'd be back. Elira didn't use the key immediately. She kept it in the drawer with the napkin and the notes, tucked beside her favorite pencil, the one she used to outline ideas before she committed them to ink. She wasn't rushing into anything. That was the promise she'd made to herself after the gala. No more moving because someone else needed her to. No more stepping into rooms as a prop. No more offering parts of herself for other people's progress. But Cassian's presence didn't feel like pressure. It felt like room. So one Saturday afternoon, after a long design meeting and an unusually warm breeze for early spring, she took a walk. She found the address he'd written under the key. It wasn't in Midtown. It wasn't glass or steel. It was quiet. A building with ivy along the brickwork and wide staircases, tucked into the edge of an old neighborhood that had resisted being swallowed by corporate developments. She walked up, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The apartment smelled like wood and lemon, the kind of scent that says someone has been caring for it quietly. There were no designer brands on display, no art pieces shouting for attention, just bookshelves, natural light, and a single framed photo on a side table, her, years ago, sitting in the bookstore cafe with a notebook in her lap. She didn't know the photo existed. It must have been taken by one of the clerks who knew their rhythm, who saw them together, who understood what silence between them meant. She stared at it for a long time, then sat on the couch and exhaled. This wasn't an invitation to move in. It was a place to sit still, to be. She stayed for 3 hours that first time, made tea, read part of a book she found tucked near the window, left the place just as she found it. Except for one thing, She left a sticky note on the kitchen counter. It read, "I didn't come here to escape. I came here to remember how to feel safe." Cassian found the note that evening. He didn't text her, didn't call. He simply folded it once and placed it inside the same drawer where he'd kept the napkin for years. Some words didn't need acknowledgement. They just needed to be kept. 2 days later, he joined Elira at the community site where her design plan was now in progress. She wore boots, jeans, and a rolled-up flannel shirt. No makeup. Hair in a knot. Cassian wore a plain navy shirt and the same kind of shoes the volunteers did. No one addressed him by title. He didn't correct them. He helped move boxes of tile, measured hallways with her, stood by the frame outlines while she mapped out spacing with chalk. At lunch, they sat on the steps with foil-wrapped sandwiches. He passed her a drink and said, "You lead quietly." She shrugged. "It's how I breathe." He nodded. "I used to think leadership had to be loud. Then I realized most of the noise came from people unsure of their own value." "You're sure now?" "No," he said honestly. "But I'm closer." She looked at him, the way she had that first day in the cafe when he read his book like it was a mirror. "You've changed," she said. He held her gaze. "So have you." They didn't kiss there, surrounded by plaster and piping and people. But they didn't need to. The way they looked at each other said enough. That night, Elira returned to her studio and opened the bottom drawer again. She looked at the napkin. The first note, the key. Then she pulled out a blank card and began writing something of her own. For the first time since they reconnected, she wasn't reacting to him. She was expressing herself. When she finished, she sealed it. No name on the front, just left it near the window the next morning, where she knew he'd see it. Later that day, Cassian picked it up. Inside was one line, "I'm not yours, but I'm not leaving either." He smiled, folded it, and placed it next to her first quote, the one she said when she still believed she'd never see him again. Comment, "She chose presence over performance. If you believe love should feel safe, not staged." Share this story with someone who's learning to trust again, slowly, honestly, and without pressure. And if you're still here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories that honor quiet strength and second chances. Cassian wasn't a man who craved credit. He didn't need applause in meetings. He didn't thrive on recognition. Most of the projects with his fingerprints on them had someone else's name engraved in the lobby. But Elira? Elira was different. She didn't want credit either. She wanted the work to matter. And that's exactly what drew him to her again. Not her silence. Not her beauty. Not even the way she carried herself like she didn't owe the world an explanation. It was her intent. And he knew now he would back that kind of integrity, even if no one ever found out. The following morning, Elira received a call from the East Gate board. Cassian Rohn just transferred an unrestricted grant to the project, the director said. Her stomach dropped. How much? More than enough to complete the build and furnish every unit. It came with a note, no control, no publicity, just support. She didn't know what to say, except, "Thank you." She hung up and sat down. Her heart wasn't racing, but her hands shook a little. She hadn't asked him for anything, and yet he still gave without strings. She pulled out her phone, drafted a message, then erased it. She didn't want to thank him in words. She'd rather show it in action. That evening, she didn't go to her apartment. She went to his. She still had the key. When she arrived, the lights were low, but the entryway lamp was on. A small sign that he'd been there, or that he wanted her to be. She let herself in, took off her shoes, set down her bag, then walked straight to the kitchen and wrote something on a sticky note. It said, "Still not yours, but I'm proud of you." She left it on the counter, then brewed tea, sat in his armchair, and waited. Cassian came in 2 hours later. He froze when he saw her, not because he was surprised, but because she was curled up in his chair like she belonged there. "Hi," she said. He stepped closer, loosened his collar. "Long day." She nodded. "But a good one." He walked to the kitchen. read the note, folded it, slid it into his wallet, then came back and sat across from her. Elira looked at him. "You didn't have to give that money. I didn't give it for you," he said calmly. "I gave it because your work deserves to exist." She blinked. "You make it hard to stay distant. Do you want distance?" "No." He didn't smile. He just said, "Then stop reaching for it." She stood, crossed the space between them, sat on the floor at his feet, leaning back into his knees. "I'm still not ready to name this," she whispered. "We don't have to," he replied. She leaned her head against him. "But I am ready to keep showing up." His hand brushed over her shoulder, not possessive, just grounding. "Then stay." She stayed that night, not in the way people assumed when they saw two people quietly disappear together. Not for performance, not for passion, for peace. Cassian didn't touch her more than a hand over hers while they sat in silence. He didn't lead her to a bedroom, didn't assume the soft weight of her head against his chest meant permission. It meant presence, and that was all they needed. They fell asleep on the couch, Elira curled into a throw blanket, Cassian still upright, one arm resting behind her. When she woke the next morning, sunlight warming the room through sheer curtains. He was in the kitchen, making breakfast like it was a normal Saturday. No questions, no awkwardness, just eggs, toast, and calm. She stretched, padded across the floor in socks, and leaned on the doorframe. "You don't talk much in the mornings," she said, amused. "I talk when something needs to be said," he replied, sliding her a mug of coffee across the counter. She took it with both hands. "I think I'm getting used to this," she murmured. "To what?" "To not explaining myself." He looked up. "You never had to. You were just in the wrong rooms." Later that afternoon, they visited the construction site again. The structure had started to rise, beams set, floor plans marked with chalk, and rooms now outlined in tape. The women who would live there came by often. Some brought their kids, others their own sketches and Pinterest printouts. Elira was there for all of it. Cassian stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching her move among the group. She wasn't giving orders, she was listening, adjusting things, smiling at ideas that weren't hers, giving credit freely. One of the young boys ran past him, laughing, then stopped suddenly. "Are you the guy with the money?" the boy asked. Cassian knelt to the boy's level. "What makes you say that?" "My mom said someone gave a lot of money to make this real." "Well, maybe I am," Cassian said. The boy grinned. "Thanks, I'm gonna have my own window." Cassian smiled. "You deserve it." The boy ran off again. Elira had seen the whole thing. When she walked over, she didn't say much, just slipped her fingers into his quietly, lacing them once. That was the first time she held his hand. That night, Cassian handed her a small box. Not a ring, just a memory. Inside was a single-page contract, blank, unsigned. At the top it read, "Silent Partnership Agreement." She laughed. "You're ridiculous." "I'm serious," he said. "No names, no press. Just me backing anything you design that makes people feel like they belong." She traced the edge of the page. "You're already doing that." "Not officially." She folded it and slid it back into the box. "Then let's make it real, but on my time." His reply came easily. "I trust you." She looked up, and her voice softened. "I trust you too. Not fully, not recklessly, but enough. And for now." That was everything. Talon Greaves sat in the back of a black SUV, parked just outside his corporate tower. He wasn't used to silence. His days had always been filled with movement, meetings, calls, deals, events, applause. Now, he could feel the space between his own breathing. Cassian hadn't said a word to the media. No press statement, no public fallout. But in the world of power and positioning, silence was the loudest kind of punishment. Investors pulled out, one by one. Quietly, the merger he'd built around reputation, around presentation, had collapsed in less than 2 weeks. And Elira? She hadn't reached out, hadn't tried to correct the record. hadn't tried to defend him. She didn't need to. Her silence confirmed everything. He ran a hand down his face, opened his laptop, and stared at his inbox. 6 notices of withdrawal. 3 internal memos. 1 final message from Ronin Holdings. The trust you've leveraged no longer exists. Let your next deals be based on merit, not masks. No signature. He didn't need one. Cassian had closed the door, and no amount of charm could open it again. Across the city, Elira stood on the 2nd floor of the East Gate build site, arms crossed, hard hat snug, watching the team frame the first interior walls. The vision was becoming real. Every beam, every corridor, every skylight, intended. She didn't think about Talon anymore, not with bitterness, not even with anger, just clarity. He hadn't broken her. He'd revealed where her strength ended and where it began again. She was thankful for that. Sometimes betrayal wasn't a tragedy. Cassian visited the site mid-afternoon. He brought smoothies this time. No cameras, no announcement. Just 2 drinks and a short lunch break. She sat on the edge of the porch step with him, dust on her boots, strands of hair slipping loose from under her cap. "You're glowing," he said. "It's the sawdust," he smiled. "It's the freedom." She sipped her drink, then asked, "Do you regret pulling out of the merger?" "Not for a second, even with the backlash." "I don't make decisions to protect noise," he said. "I make them to protect people." She didn't reply. She just leaned her shoulder into his. Soft contact, no performance. Back at Rowan Holdings, Cassian held a quiet meeting with 3 board members. They reviewed Talon's ethics violations, personal conduct, false representations, manipulation of private equity reports. No lawsuits, no drama, just removal. Clean and final. Cassian didn't offer revenge. He offered accountability, then walked out of the room and never mentioned Talon Greaves again. That night, Elira opened her sketchbook and drew something new, not a layout, not a structure, just a small symbol, a window with light pouring through. Below it, she wrote in ink, nothing staged, everything true. She closed the book and exhaled. Talon didn't fight the removal. There were no fiery statements, no retaliation, no blindsiding press releases. He knew what had happened. Cassian had pulled back the curtain, quietly, and the audience had left the room. He tried to start again elsewhere, tried to take meetings with a new wave of investors who didn't know him before the bracelet scandal. But somehow, they knew. Reputation didn't need volume to disappear. It could vanish in whispers. What stung most wasn't the business collapse. It was that no one defended him. Not one voice, not one hand reached back to say he meant well, because they all knew he didn't. Elira, meanwhile, wasn't watching his downfall. She wasn't refreshing updates or tracking corporate chatter. She was designing window fixtures for a safe house kitchen. She just approved a set of open shelving that allowed residents to display plates they chose themselves. "It gives them ownership," she told the builder. A small thing, but real. Cassian had funded the last 12% of the project quietly, but he'd never asked for a name on it. Never tried to position himself in the PR cycle. He knew now, real change didn't come with press. It came with peace. They had dinner that evening on the rooftop of his brownstone. Nothing formal. Just takeout in paper containers, soft jazz playing from a tiny speaker, and string lights overhead. Elira sat barefoot on a low bench, her feet tucked beneath her. Cassian sat across from her, back against the wall, sleeves rolled up, eyes on her, but not trying to read her. "Do you think we're building towards something?" she asked, "or just learning how not to tear things down?" "Both," he answered. She nodded slowly. "I thought I'd feel guiltier about how everything ended with Talon." "You don't?" "I feel relieved," she said. "Not because he lost, but because I stopped pretending." Cassian's expression stayed still, but his fingers gently reached for her foot under the table, resting against her ankle. "I saw you the first time you walked into that bookstore," he said, "and every version of you since has only been stronger." She didn't cry, but she folded his words and placed them somewhere inside her, next to the napkin. the key, the quote, and the quiet truths they never needed to shout. Later that night, Cassian received a final report from Rowan Holdings' legal team. Talon Greaves has officially forfeited all rights to the equity tie-in, it read. The chain was broken. For good. Cassian placed the file into his archive folder and closed the laptop. Then looked at the only folder on his desk that mattered, Clarity Projects. Phase 2. He opened it. At the top, Elira's name. Not as a consultant, not as a favor, as the lead. And this time, he didn't hesitate to type her title beside it, Vision Architect. Not because he owed her anything, but because she had become the foundation he wanted to build from. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for Eastgate Housing was small by design. No press, no sponsors, just community board members, residents, and a few local builders who had donated their time. Elira stood by the entrance, clipboard in hand, hair pulled back, wearing a simple navy dress and flat shoes. She hadn't rehearsed a speech. She didn't plan to speak at all. But the board asked her to say a few words. She stepped up to the front steps, adjusted the mic slightly, and looked out, not at a crowd, but at faces. Real people. Women who had survived harder things than being overlooked. Children who would fall asleep in bedrooms designed to make them feel like they belonged. She cleared her throat. I was never supposed to be the face of anything, she said. For a long time, I worked behind projects, never in front of them. And that used to make me feel small. She paused, glancing at a window on the second floor. But then I learned something. Being seen isn't always about standing on stages. Sometimes it's about standing still and doing the work in a way that doesn't erase the people it's for. She smiled faintly. This place, it's for them. And that's enough. No applause, just soft nods. And that was exactly what she wanted. Cassian stood at the back. No suit, just a white button-down and rolled sleeves. He didn't speak, didn't even step forward, but his eyes didn't leave her. She wasn't just leading a project. She was leading quietly and effectively in a way few people ever learned how. And she didn't need validation from headlines or gallery boards. She had hers, in full. After the ceremony, they walked the hallways together. Elira showed him a corner unit with pale yellow walls and soft rugs. A mother of two had picked the shade herself. She wanted it to feel like the sun, Elira said. Cassian touched the window pane. It does. They kept walking. Each room had a story, a request, a fingerprint. This place is filled with dignity, he said. She looked at him. You helped make that possible. I didn't design it. You believed in it, she replied, without needing to control it. He stopped walking, turned to her fully. Do you know how rare that is? She asked. His eyes didn't waver. You make it easier. Back at her studio that evening, Elira opened her drawer. Inside. The folded napkin too notes the key, a printout of her title on the Phase 2 folder. She added a small photo from the ribbon cutting, just a Polaroid someone had handed her with her name scrawled on the back. No filter, no flash, no posing, just her, smiling, real. She stared at it a long time, then wrote a short sentence on the back before placing it in the drawer. I don't need to be marked. I am. That night, Cassian walked her home, not to her apartment, to the studio, because lately that space had become more than a workplace. It was her rhythm, her clarity, her anchor. They entered in silence, the soft glow from the desk lamp already on. She set her bag down, kicked off her shoes, and moved straight to the shelf where her design samples lived. I have 3 more proposals to finalize, she said. You have time, I know. But I don't want to rush this part. It matters. He watched her for a moment, then walked over, placing a slim envelope on the desk beside her laptop. What's that? She asked. He didn't answer right away, so she opened it. Inside, a simple contract and a handwritten note. The contract read, Proposal for Community Design Division, Vision Lead, Elira Noel. The note underneath said, You're not just an architect of space, you're an architect of peace. Let's build something permanent, together at your pace. She looked up at him. This isn't symbolic, is it? No, he said quietly. It's real. Backed, signed, no PR, no strings. She exhaled, then folded the contract back into the envelope, pressed her hand over it, and said, "Okay." Not with excitement, with certainty. Later that night, she found herself on the studio floor, leaning against Cassian's chest, wrapped in one of the soft throws she kept near the window bench. They didn't talk for a while. Then she whispered, "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something to go wrong?" "Yes," he answered, "but not tonight." She closed her eyes. "What if we don't need to name this?" she asked. "Then we don't," he replied. "But I'll still show up, every day, every way." Her breath caught. "I've never had someone show up without needing to be seen for it." He kissed her temple. Soft, barely there. "That's because they were trying to be powerful," he said. "I'm trying to be present." By morning, they made no big plans, no sudden moves. She drafted blueprints for a youth mentorship space. He emailed a contact to help fast-track her community permit. The world outside still spun. Talon's name was still fading from investor circles. But in their quiet corner of the city, two people who once collided under false timing were building something slow, something whole, and nothing about it needed approval. It just needed time. The first week of construction on Illyria's second project began before sunrise. This one was smaller than Eastgate, tucked in a quiet section of Queens. A mentorship space for teen girls aged 12 to 18. Part learning center, part creative lab, part rest stop for lives that hadn't had many. Illyria stood outside that morning, watching workers unload lumber. She didn't need to direct anything. Everyone already knew what she expected. Grace in the details, dignity in the structure. Cassian arrived 10 minutes later. No suit, just a navy hoodie and clean boots. He handed her coffee and didn't say a word. They stood shoulder to shoulder as the first beam went up. "You ever think we'd get here?" she asked softly. "No," he admitted. "But I think we were always meant to." Later that evening, they returned to his place. It had become their place now, not because she moved in, but because it felt like somewhere her peace was welcome. Illyria sat on the floor in front of the fireplace. She didn't light it, just like the brick, the frame, the quiet. Cassian returned from the kitchen with 2 glasses of water and a small box. "What's that?" she asked. "A drawer gift," he said, kneeling in front of her. She raised an eyebrow. "Another note?" "No," he said. "A key." She blinked. "To what?" "To your own office space, on the ground floor of the Clarity Project's building. It's unfinished. You can design it however you want. No one else will ever have access to it, but you." She sat up straighter. "Cassian, I'm not asking you to owe me anything. I'm giving you room to dream as far as you want." She took the key slowly. "It's too much," she whispered. "No. It's right on time." She looked at him fully then. "I never needed a man to build something for me." "I know," he said. "I'm not building it for you. I'm building it because of you." Her eyes burned, not from sadness, from finally feeling safe. Later that night, she placed the new key beside the napkin, beside the notes, beside the silent contract and the sketch of the window. And this time, she added one more thing. A simple white card with one sentence written in ink. "When love doesn't shout, it stays." 6 weeks later, the mentorship center's ribbon cutting was held quietly, again without fanfare. Illyria stood in front of the entrance with a group of teen girls, each holding a pair of scissors wrapped in ribbon. No speeches, no announcements, just the act of starting something meaningful, together. Inside, the center was filled with warm colors, low seating, creative corners, and hidden messages etched into wooden frames. Quotes from women who had lived through hard beginnings and found their voice anyway. In the main hallway, above the exit, one phrase was painted in quiet font. "Let this space remember your name for how you lived, not what you survived." Cassian saw it before anyone else did, and he smiled. Because that was Illyria. After the crowd cleared, she found him standing near the back, arms crossed, watching her with the kind of look that didn't need words. "I'm thinking of leaving something behind," she said as she approached. "Here?" "No, in the drawer." He tilted his head. "The drawer? The one with the napkin, the key, the notes." He stepped closer. "What are you leaving?" She pulled out a slip of paper from her jacket and handed it to him. He unfolded it. "I don't need to be remembered. I just want to be useful." He read it twice, then folded it carefully. "You are..." She smiled, then added softly, "So are you." Later that evening, Cassian stood in his private office at Rowan Holdings. The lights were dim. The city glowed beyond the windows like a soft pulse. He placed the slip of paper in a box labeled Legacy. It didn't include awards or deals or contracts, just the things that never needed a title to matter. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "She wasn't mine, but she redefined what I wanted to leave behind." Elira closed the drawer in her studio one last time that night. The napkin, the notes, the contract, the card, the key, all of it told a story. Not about a man who claimed her, not about a mistake that hurt her, not even about power that nearly turned her into a symbol, but about presence, quiet presence, the kind that shows up, stays, and never has to be announced to be real. Comment she was never his to mark, but she changed his legacy forever if this story moved you. Share this final chapter with someone who believes that love is shown in how we choose to stay, not how loud we arrive. Don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more quiet justice, real emotion, and unforgettable characters who remind us what peace really looks like.